So how many roses here?
Well, we've in this actual greenhouse, which is half a hectare, we plant about 40,000 stems or plants, and from that we're expecting to get about 3,000 stems a day.
Wow. Over £1.5 billion of flowers are sold in the UK each year, and millions will be bought for Mother's Day. Many of them will be imported from farms like this. And
So,
these will go where, these flowers?
to the retailers in the UK. Yeah.
And is this a particular Mother's Day colour?
Absolutely. There's so many shades of pink, and that is our main Mother's Day colour.
Flying out of Nairobi, I headed out over the Rift Valley. Our destination was Lake Naivasha, the heart of Kenya's flower-growing industry. I was here in 2003, highlighting campaigners' worries about the environmental impact of the trade on the lake. We'd made public serious concerns about working conditions too.
The flower farm I'm working with, I think we experience a lot of problems there.
The argument has been that food and flowers for export are Africa's best chance of growing economically. Horticulture now accounts for 14% of Kenya's GDP. But recently authorities here have questioned how much of that money actually stays in Kenya. They suspect the profits have been shifted elsewhere.
It's not about what is legal and illegal anymore. It's about what is ethical and what is unethical.
I had come back to look into this new complaint and to see if anything had changed. Who are the winners and losers from the flower business today? This is Flamingo Farm. I was being shown round by the farm manager, Craig.
Because they are beautiful.
They're beautiful.
I mean, you've got your tree fern here, and your gypsophila, cerise roses, and standard carnations. So.
He told us about the crisis in 2009, when the lake shrank in a severe drought, putting the whole business under threat.
We have to be very, very vigilant on our water usage. We have several communities here. We have the nomadic Maasai, who rely on the lake for their drinking water for their cattle. We also have a large amount of game. We also have the population around the lake as well. We need to ensure that there is enough water for everyone. I wouldn't say there's necessarily a conflict, but what we need to do is bring ourselves all together to share this resource.
Some of the big companies like Flamingo have invested heavily and managed to cut their water use dramatically. Flamingo's also worked hard with other organisations around the lake to agree how to share this vital resource. I wondered whether the groups Craig mentioned saw the same progress too. You're one of the leaders of the pastoralists.
Yes,
one
I'm
of the
one
Maasai.
of them around here in Naivasha.
And tell me a little bit about the lake and how you use it.
As a pastoralist for the 13 years I've been here, grazing as a young boy, coming here as the leader of the pastoralist. I've seen this lake changing, which has really reduced our grazing land since the days of our grandfathers. Yeah.
Do you think there's a good balance between the different needs of business for water and the other people like pastoralists, fishermen at the moment?
I would say actually there's no much balance, because you realize that as pastoralists with our animals, and 95% of our income come from these animals, we see that because of the increase in development around this lake, access routes to the lake is becoming reduced. It's becoming very little compared to the number of livestock we have. So the issue of conflict, the issue of soil erosion becomes a problem in this case. So we find that, for example, the flower farms having more access to water than us.
The flower farms create lots of jobs for people, don't they? They're a really important part of the economy, though.
Yes.
So are you saying they shouldn't be here?
I will not really say they should not be here, because our brothers and fellow Kenyans are working in it, also depending on it in terms of income and to sustain their families. But we also see, as pastoralists, we are not benefiting from it, because you see, most of us are not educated. Most of these flower farms are trying to look for people who at least have an education.
Back at the farm, production was still in full swing. These flowers were destined for M&S in the UK. At peak periods like Mother's Day, 1 million stems can be dispatched each day. Overseeing production was Karen. She'd worked her way up through the ranks. A lot of effort's gone into training and promoting local staff since 2003.
Tell me a little bit about the sort of people who are working here. Are they people who've come into the area? Are they people who lived here already? Or?
Quite a number of people, because Kenya is obviously quite a big country, actually migrate from various places. Western Kenya is probably like 4 or 5 hours away from here. You have people who are residents or who have families there who come and look for employment here. So it's a very mixed cultured industry because there's a lot of employment.
All the flamingo flowers are now produced to fair trade standards. M&S has worked with the company to respond to most of the criticisms. Workers here told us that conditions really have improved and are good. Pesticide use has been cut drastically. The consumer outcry in 2003 seemed to have driven big changes. I wondered if the same was true across the industry. I arranged to meet up with a worker from a different company. She didn't want us to identify where she worked.
Do you think it's good that the flower farms are here or not?
It's good because it have helped many of our ladies. Most of us, we are single and we are left with the children. So I think it have helped us as women, although their payments is not good to us. Yeah.
How much money are you usually paid each month?
Me, I'm paid 65.
6,500.
6,500.
And is that enough?
It is not enough. That I told you that that is not enough money for me. So I go underfeeding. So I also underfeed my children.
What do you hope your children will do?
I don't wish my children to work in a flower farm. I want them to become engineers. I need lawyers there. I also need doctors. Yeah.
Many workers we met described how hard it was to live on the wages. They're above the legal minimum, but still a struggle to survive on, especially as AIDS and unemployment among men has left many women as the breadwinners. The sector's thought to employ between 60 and 90,000 directly and around 500,000 indirectly. Add in their families, and it supports over 2 million people in Kenya. But what's the effect of the influx of migrant workers on the local town and its infrastructure?
Can you tell me what the impact of the horticulture industry has been on the area here in Naivasha?
I guess way back in 1980, Naivasha was having a population of say around 60,000 people. The population now is, I guess, 240,000. So these people need houses, they need schools, they need hospitals, and all those other services.
Recognising how desperate the need is, the industry agreed last year to begin paying a new local tax.
Do you feel the industry contributes enough?
Let me say they contribute quite well for national development, for national growth. But for Naivasha municipality, they give us, nowadays they give us a bit of money to help subsidize what we collect in town so that we can offer some services. But I would say it's not enough.
I caught up with the flowers as they were being loaded onto planes for their journey to Europe and UK supermarkets. Horticultural exports bring in around $500 million to the economy. They're one of Kenya's biggest sources of revenue. But how much they contribute to Kenya's long-term growth depends on how much of the money they generate stays in Kenya. The Kenya Revenue Authority recently said it was investigating the whole flower sector, including the 3 largest multinationals. It suspects they're routing their profits elsewhere and not paying a fair share in Kenya. We wanted to speak to the head of the Revenue about its investigation, but he wasn't available. It's a sensitive subject. Some of the political elite have large investments in horticulture. We were able, however, to take our figures to Jack Ranguma. He used to be Kenya's head of domestic tax, and he'd started his own investigation into the flower industry in 2004.
All these appear to indicate that the prices we receive back for the goods, for the flowers we export, is much, much less than what they are sold at the international markets.
Jack explained to me what he suspected was happening with multinationals. He believes they shift costs and profits around between their subsidiary companies in different countries, in some case offshore, so that there's less to tax in Kenya.
I think as a country we are losing money through this process, and it is necessary that we dig deep into it to know why the flower sector is not making as much money as they should.
Our investigation was raising some serious questions. Examination of Flamingo's corporate structure does not suggest the use of offshore subsidiaries, but other flower companies do have tax haven structures. I arranged to meet with Jane Ngige from the Kenya Flower Council, which represents many of the flower growers in Kenya. I started by asking how profitable the industry is.
I believe that what one needs to understand is that, yes, the industry is perceived to be very well heeled, but it is highly capitalized, but the profit margins are very limited. Today, very few of those farms will make profits beyond 5%.
Jack had told us he found that hard to believe when so many companies were keen to invest in the sector. Atia Waris is a tax expert from the University of Nairobi, and I asked her if she thought that the sector was unprofitable.
No single company, as an executive, strategic, profit-making institution, ever walks into a country, spends millions of shillings or dollars or pounds or euros putting up a business, and then turns around and says, we're not making a profit, but it's okay, we're going to stay. I really don't believe that it is humanly possible for a company that survives purely on its ability to make a profit is going to turn around and tell you that we have a company in this country for the past 10 years or 20 years, and we're just a benevolent association, we're just here to give employment and development, and we're really not making a profit. That is a fairy tale.
The Kenyan tax authorities have said they're going to investigate the sector and that they're looking at all the biggest 3 flower producers because the industry isn't paying enough tax, that they're using various mechanisms to take more of the money offshore than they leave in Kenya.
We are inundated with taxes, left, right and centre. Some we can justify, some we cannot.
Jane said the industry welcomed the investigation, but until the government had looked at the figures, it was just speculation to say they weren't paying enough tax. So you want more tax breaks?
If it is important enough to the country, the government does need to provide some sort of support, like happens in other countries like Ethiopia.
This is the dilemma facing countries like Kenya. They need tax for services and development. But with so many countries desperate to attract investment, there are always governments who are prepared to offer even bigger tax breaks, and they end up in a race to the bottom. The economic benefit from the resources used in Africa, the water, the land, the people, ends up being transferred to shareholders in more developed countries. What would you say to people who buy flowers and vegetables from here in Europe?
I would say, other than just buying that flower, they should consider how is the community benefiting. Then that will really help us.